to tell a nice, quiet, gentle story because, oh my goodness, there's sweat pouring after me already. Woo! And so I'm going to tell us a nice, non-sweaty story where I can just kind of stand still. We're going to be nice and peaceful and gentle for the first half. And then if we get through the first half, we'll have a wee break. And we'll go a bit mad in the second half. And there's another wee break. We all finish up here, and the musicians come, they set back up for them, and then the music starts. So if you're staying for the music, I think you have to get out first, and then they set it up and then come back in. Alright. It's a long of introductions. Okay, so this is a story from Scotland. Is there anyone from Scotland? It's the okay, we're very gentle and retiring in Scotland. Okay, this is a story from Scotland, and it's from a part of Scotland, kind of up there. Okay, so I'm checking the dictionary. Not dictionary, what's that? Atlas, up there, okay. And there's like mountains, and there's farms, and there's a haggis, and all sorts up there, okay. And there's a farmer, okay, there's a farmer. And the farmer has a happy life, okay? Whatever else happens in this story, I want to start off by pointing out his life was happy. Okay, it was a happy life. He had a happy life, he was a farmer, in his wee farm, he had a big heap of cows, and he had a big heap of sheep, sheepsies. He had a big heap of sheepsies and cows. He had a big heap of daughters as well, okay? He had 3 daughters. And things were grand, okay? But then, bad things happened. At this point, I'm going to recommend find somebody you can hug, hold on to, emotional support, your comfort person, okay? Okay, bad things happened. A storm came, okay? And the wind was going, woo! And the trees were going, and it was terrible. And there was, oh my goodness, a mad storm. And the next day the farmer woke up and he looked out his window and oh my goodness, the bar had been blown down, trees had fallen down, and his cows and his sheepsies had all vanished. They'd been scattered hither, thither, and gone. They were gone. Okay. So his sheepsies and his cows are gone, and he's very upset. So he has to go and find them. So he turns to his daughters and he says, "Daughters, I'm going to go and find the cows and the sheep, plural." And the 2 older daughters, they're like, yeah. They even threw their phone out and they were so amazed. Because that was the kid the way they were, like, hashtag we don't give a shit. Okay? They were doing their TikTok or whatever, Tinder or whatever, I don't know. They were doing it anyway. What were they doing in Scotland? No, it wasn't me! No, you were supposed to go, whoa! Sorry, did I just propose you? That was really bad. Oh my god. Yeah, I apologise. Oh my god. Just for that whole interaction there. Okay! Centering. Okay, so he says to his daughters, I'm going out to find the sheep and the cows. The 2 older daughters are like, hashtag don't care. The younger daughter, Morag, she was a lovely daughter, okay? She was lovely. She always helps in the farm. She does cooking, she does cleaning, she does all that stuff. She says, "Father, I'll come with you." He says, No, you stay here, look after the house. I'll go and find the cows and the sheep. She says, okay. And she makes him a wee packed lunch, okay? She makes him some sandwiches and a bottle of water and an apple and all this kind of stuff. And you should speak to that woman there from Scotland. There's apples in Scotland. We have apples in Scotland. She had an apple. Oh, he had an apple. Anyway, so off he went, and he was looking for his cows and his sheep, and he wandered about. And he was looking over mountains and valleys and rivers and woods, and he was not finding the cows or the sheep anywhere. Okay, he was bereft, okay? He was like, oh my goodness, I cannot find my cows or my sheep. And he was very upset. And he was getting tired. So at some point he just sat down there, like in a wee country lane, he just sat there and he was nibbling his apple and he was having a wee drink and he was kind of, oh dear, and he was feeling a bit put out. And then he looked and he saw a wee dog, a wee kind of, you know, the wee Highland Terriers, the kind of wee black dogs, very furry, big square faces and little short legs, you know those wee dogs? There was a wee dog and it was kind of wandering about. And it kind of looked kind of forlorn and bereft as well. It was kind of going, his wee tail was between his legs. Emotional stuff now. I said, oh, come here. And the wee dog ran over and he patted the wee dog. And the dog went, woof. I says, here, have a wee bit of water, a wee bit of the apple, and have a wee bit of the sandwich. And the wee dog ate it, and ate with the apple, and it went woof, 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 and his wee ears perked up, and his wee tail perked up, and it went woof, 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 and it kind of scratched its head and licked its arse, and I don't know whatever dogs do. It was very happy. It went woof, 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 woof. Thank you very much.
So I went, did you just say, thank you very much?
Of course, thank you very much. I went, all right, you're a talking dog. Of course, I'm a Scottish dog, I thought, it's fine. I went, grand. Well, it was nice to meet you. I just, you looked a wee bit forlorn and bereft there, and I thought you'd maybe want to come over for a bit of company. The dog went, thank you, I appreciate that, because I noticed you looked a wee bit bereft as well. And the farmer, he's a very articulate dog, this. The farmer said, I am. He said, I had a terrible evening, and I'm kind of looking for something now. And the dog went, ruff. That's curious. I'm looking for something too. And the farmer went, well, I'm looking for my cows and my sheeps. And the wee dog went, well, I'm looking for a wife. And the farmer went, you've lost your wife. And the wee dog went, ruff, 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 ruff. No, I don't have a wife. I'm looking for a wife. I said, I tell you what, ruff, 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 ruff. I know that you get three beautiful daughters. And I'm an expert being a Scottish Highland dog at hunting things down. So I'm going to make a deal with you. Ruff, 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 ruff. I'll make a deal with you. Ruff. Why don't I go and look for your cows and your sheepsies? And if I find them, then you will give me one of your daughters. And the farmer went, oh, I don't know about that. That's just a wee bit too, I don't know, 1990s there. No, I don't know. So tell you what, he said, if you find my cows and my sheepsies, I'll let you propose to my daughters. And if any of them say they want to become your wife, then I'll give you my blessing. How's that? And the dog went, woof, 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 woof. That's fine. Woof, woof, woof. And he wagged his tail, licked his arse, scratched his head, and went, okay, I'm off. I'll see you tonight. So the wee dog went off woof, 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 to look for the cows and the sheep. Right? So the farmer made his way back to his house. And he got back to the house, he came into the house, and it was evening time. And Morag had made a nice meal, and they were all sitting down. And the farmer said to his three daughters, now daughters, just to let you know, there may be a visitor tonight. And the three girls, they're all kind of perked up, because they've not had visitors for a long time. This is Scotland in the Highlands, they're going to get visitors, okay? It's like, well, they're like very excited. And he's about to explain things to them when there's a chap at the door. Hold on, special effects now. And he says, girls, that's the visitor. And one of them says, it's a gentleman. He goes, yeah, it's a gentleman. And the girls go, ooh, they pinched their cheeks to get push the bosoms up. And so the farmer went, and he opened the door to his farm. And he looked out, and the first thing he saw was the cows and the sheep. And there was extra cows and sheep that he'd never seen before. It was like a tsunami of cows and sheep coming out. Wow! wow! And the wee dog's like, ruff, 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 will this do you? And he went, thank you very much. Thank you so much for bringing all these cows and sheep. Can I come in and propose to your daughters? Of course, he says. Come away in and propose. So he takes them back into the kitchen. Takes them to the kitchen, and the girls are there. And he says, girls, here's the visitor. And the girls look around, and they look down, and there's the wee dog. The girls go, it's a dog. The wee dog goes, that's right, I'm Mr. Dog. They'll go, oh, father, what is this? And the father said, well, I don't know how to explain this to you. But you see, the wee dog jumped up and went, what he says is, if I find your cows and I find your sheep, I can marry yous. Well, I can propose to yous, and if any of yous want to marry me, I'll make you a fine husband. Licks his ass, scratches his head, does all the things, and all the girls are looking at him. And the oldest girl, she goes, no way, that is, whoa! And she kind of pushes her chair back, she rushes over, and she goes to kick the wee dog. Yeah, Mr. Dog goes, "Arr!" And he bites her on the ankle. Ah, she says. She jumps on the table. Ah! So then the second daughter, she kind of comes away from her chair. She grabs a broom. She goes to hit Mr. Dog. Ah, get out, she says. And the dog goes, ah, jumps and bites her on the backside. Ah, teeth in a bit of rope there. Ah, ah. She jumps up the table as well. Now the third daughter, the sophisticated young one, she sat there and she's looking at all this kind of going on. And the wee dog's going, ah, and her sisters are going, ah, and the father's going, ah. And she goes, she pushes her chair back and she turns round and she looks at Mr. Dog and she said, do you know what? I might be interested in becoming your wife. And the wee dog goes, ruff, 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 ruff. Yes? Yes, she said, Mr. Dog. I'm curious, I'm interested, because I'm kind of bored here in a farm in the middle of Scotland. There's no visitors. There's just, it's boring. The broadband connection is really bad. I might as well marry a dog. However, she says, I'm not desperate. I need to check a few things first. I want to check some things. I can see you're very clever. You found all the missing sheep and cows, a few extras. That's very clever. And you're very brave. You took on my two mean sisters and you got them up there on the table. You're very brave. However, I need to check, how would you keep me? And Mr. Dog goes, ruff, 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 ruff. Oh, that's no problem. He says, I can keep you very well. I've got a lovely cottage. If you become my wife, it becomes your cottage. And I have lots of money, so the money becomes your money. Oh, she says, so you're clever, you're brave, you've got a house, you've got money. She says, there's one more thing that's actually very important. This is the most important thing of all. Are you affectionate? And the wee dog looks at her and goes, ruff, 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 jumps onto her lap, puts his head in her belly and goes, she goes, oh, Mr. Dog, Mr. Dog, down, Mr. Dog, down. Tail back. She goes, oh, blushing. Oh, you are very affectionate. I'll tell you what, Father, can I marry Mr. Dog? It happens in Scotland, it's fine, it's all. Maybe culturally sensitive here. Okay. And the farmer says, of course you can marry. So Morag, she leaves the farm. She leaves the little dog there. And she says, how are we going to get to this cottage with the money and all that? And the wee dog says, what? And he whistles. He doesn't whistle. He taps his foot. And a horse appears, a big white horse. And Mr. Dog jumps up the back of the horse. And he says to Morag, jump up behind me, grab my ears, and we'll head off. And wee Morag, she's never been on a horse in her life. It's a mighty big horse. She's like, all right, she says, and she kind of throws her leg over, ah! And she gets on the horse, oh! And she's holding on to Mr. Dog's ears, ah! And whoop, the horse heads off. Okay. okay? The horse is galloping, it's leaping over hedges, it's splashing through rivers, it's going up mountains and down valleys and all sorts of things. And poor wee Morag, she's on there like, ah! And she's holding on to the ears as much as she can, ah! And her hair's going this way, and her arse is getting sore, oh my goodness. But you know, there was something wonderful about it. There was something exciting, watching trees fly by in the air, and her hair's going like this, and her cheeks, and all the wind in her face. It was just so marvellous and so exciting, and it was just wonderful. And suddenly, all finished. And the horse trotted and stopped. And wee Mr. Dog jumped down. He jumped down. He said, "Come down, Morag." Morag came off the horse. And she looked. And there was a field. And in the field was a beautiful cottage. A lovely, lovely cottage. She went, "Oh my goodness, that is so beautiful." Mr. Dog said, "It's your cottage now." "Come away in," he says, "come away in." So she popped in. It was a lovely warm day, so she had a drink of water. And she was going out. She said, "I'm going to drink of water, Mr. Dog, just so I can savour it properly." She goes in, and she's in, and inside it was beautiful. There was a lovely table there. There was furnishings of a cupboard. There was lovely crockery. There was a nice stove there. It was beautiful. And she was looking at it all. And she kind of looked at Mr. Dog and she went, "Oh my goodness, Mr. Dog, I have never seen anything so wonderful and marvellous. This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life." And Mr. Dog goes, "Ruff, ruff, ruff. You haven't seen anything yet." And with that, he kind of wiggled. And then he changed shape. And he slowly got taller and taller and taller. And he turned into a tall, beautiful, handsome, debonair, sophisticated, dark-eyed, beautiful, and naked man. With Mr. Dog! Mr. Dog! Come with me, Morag. I'll show you a few more things. And so she did! And Mr. Dog took her hand and they left the kitchen and they went to the room up the stairs, okay? And they lay down together as husband doth lay with wife, okay? So they doffed, and they doffed some more, and they carried on doffing. And I'm just going to pull a curtain over that. I'll stand here for a minute. Sun comes up. Next day, okay. Next day, Morag comes down to the kitchen. And she's all blushed cheeks and her hair's like this. And she's still about wobbly leg. Oh my goodness. And she sits down and she's making some porridge. Mr. Dog comes down. Maybe he's got a robe on or something. He's looking very sophisticated. "How's it going, Morag?" She's like, "Fine, I'm just making some porridge." He goes, "Well, let's make some porridge together." And so, even though they were exhausted, they began to make porridge. And they made porridge all morning together, and all afternoon with the porridge making. Porridging and porridging till they're porridged out. That's a euphemism. Okay. What can I say? So finally, a couple of days of porridging go by and doffing. Finally, they kind of rest. They have to rest at some point because poor Morag, oh my God. So they rest. And she looks at Mr. Morag, they're sat at the table. She goes, "Mr. Dog," she says, "Mr. Dog, this is most amazing. It is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful." He says, "Yeah, I know, I am wonderful." And she goes, and yet you go about the world in the shape of a dog. Why is that? Because you mean you're like the most handsome, rugged man in Scotland. As well as a story. I'll explain it to you. You see, a long time ago, he's not going to do any barking now because he's now a human. We all figured this out. Okay. There's a long time ago, the Sky Princess who rules the sky, who rules the weather and all the elements and the winds and the storm. The Sky Princess, the most powerful being. She decided she wanted to get wed. She decided she wanted a husband. And she decided she was going to marry the most handsome man in Scotland. And she no sooner said this than my mother, who was pregnant at the time, she gave birth. And she gave birth to me, and she held me in her arms, and she looked at the wee boy in her arms, and she realised I would grow to be the most handsome man in Scotland. And my mother realised when I grew to be the most handsome man in Scotland, the Sky Princess would take me away from her, and I'd never see her again. So to protect me, she turned me into a dog. And when I went, hold on, I just want to just fact check this. Your mother decided that to stop you marrying a powerful, beautiful being, she would turn you into a dog. Yeah. Well, that's more porridge for me. What the hell? That's great. That's fine. But she says, oh, I'm so happy. I'm going to go and tell my sisters and my father that you're actually a handsome, rugged man. Mr. Dog went, oh. No, he said. You must not tell anybody. No one must know that I am actually a man. To all the world beyond this cottage, I remain a dog. They must only know that I am a dog. For if anybody finds out I'm a man, if you whisper that I'm a man, the Sky Princess will hear, and she will come and she will take me from you, and we will never lay again together, and we will be parted forever. Morag went, I wouldn't want that, Mr. Dog. I was quite enjoying not being parted from you, so that'd be nice. She said, well, does that mean no? She started to get a few doubts. Does that mean I have to stay in the cottage? I mean, it's a nice cottage, but I have to stay here? I mean, that's a bit creepy. But no, he said. You can leave any time you want. Just call up the big white horse. The horse will take you to anywhere you want to go in the world. And then when you want to come back, just call on the horse, and the horse will bring you back to the cottage. And Morag, she was so happy with this. Everything she wanted in life was perfect. She had her own house, her own husband, she had money, she had crockery, she had everything she wanted, and she could travel anywhere. And she did. She travelled all around the world with the white horse. She visited places, she bought things, she had a wonderful time. And of course she would go and she'd visit her family, her sisters and her father. And she missed them, and she wanted to see them. But the problem was her sisters were so mean. Every time she visited them, they were always doing something nasty. They would put the food on the floor and say, you eating the floor. Or they would say to you, if your husband's a dog, does that mean you're a bitch? And poor Morag, she was like, oh. But she kept her mouth shut. But you could see her father was getting upset. Her father was getting very upset with these every time she went. He was getting more and more upset. So this went on for a wee while. And then around came Christmas. It was winter. And the snow was doing the snow thing. And yes. And so she got the horse and she went back to the farm. And there was her father and there's her two sisters. Her two sisters had been so mean to her. And the father was getting so upset, he was almost crying. He was like, stop that girl, stop that. They're saying, she's married to a dog, father. So she's married to a dog. And the father took his dog, Morag, aside and said, Morag, I love you. And I can see you're very happy. You got a blush on your cheeks there, you look very content with life. But you know what? You are married to a dog. And you're all a bit upset and confused. And Morag could see her father, he was almost crying when he was talking to her. She said, Father, she said. She bent towards him, she whispered, she said, I've got a secret for you. You cannot tell anybody. And she whispered to him and she said, Father, Mr. Dog is not a dog. He's actually a very handsome, beautiful man. And she no sooner spoke than suddenly, a terrible piercing went through her, and a terrible sense of grief and loss, and she suddenly realised, oh my goodness, I should not have done that, Father. And she ran outside, she ran out into the snow, and she called for the great white horse, and she called, but the horse did not come. Now poor wee Morag, She didn't know what to do. And she decided she would try and find the cottage herself. So she set off that night. And the wind was at her. The wind and the snow and the rain were at her. And she was slipping and she'd pick herself up. And then the night would freeze and all the wet clothes would freeze her and turn to ice. And she'd fall down, she'd bang herself, she'd pick herself up. And she kept going, trying to find the wee cottage, trying to find Mr. Dog. And all the time, the rain was at her and the wind was at her and the wind was going. It was getting very dramatic. And she went on and on and on. And finally, the night ended. And the first glimmers of the dawn came. It was a very dark dawn. The clouds were still heavy. And finally she came to the field. She came to the field and there was the cottage. But oh my goodness, she wept. For when she saw her cottage, it was as if it had been smashed by a tornado. The windows were all pulled out. The door frame was hanging off, and all her goods, all her beautiful crockery and cloths and everything, all her goods were lying in the snow. And she was so upset. And she made her way into the cottage. And the cottage was dark inside and full of shadows. And she called out, "Mr. Dog, Mr. Dog, are you there, Mr. Dog?" But it was only the shadows. And she stood there looking around. As she was looking around, she saw one of the shadows begin to move. And the shadow came closer to her, and it took on a form. And it was a figure of a woman, and she was all dressed in rags. And she held out her finger and she said, "You foolish girl, you foolish, foolish girl, you have told the world that my son is a man. How dare you?" And Morag looked at the old woman and went, "Oh, are you Mr. Dog's mammy?" "I am." "You're my mother-in-law, nice to meet you." "Foolish girl." And she pulled out a pair of scissors. They were long, long, sharp scissors. And she came over to Morag. "Foolish girl," she said. "Foolish girl, I will never see my son again." "Oh, Morgan, he's my husband as well. I miss him too. I would do anything. I would do anything to get Mr. Dog back." And the old woman looked at her and said, "Anything? Would you do anything?" And Morgan said, "I would. I'd give my life for Mr. Dog." The old woman came closer with the scissors, and she looked at Morag and she said, "Okay, I'm glad you said that. Maybe I will trust you." And instead of stabbing her, she turned round and she gave her the scissors. She said, "Take these." Morag went, "Thank you, mother-in-law. Nice scissors. Thank you for not stabbing me." She said, "Take these as well." She put her hand in her pocket and she took out thread. She put a big bundle of thread and she took out a darning needle. And she gave them. She gave them to Morag. Morag said, "What am I supposed to do with these?" The old woman said, "Go and find my son. Go and find your husband. Go and bring him back. Rescue him from the Sky Princess." "I will, I will." And she said, "If you're ever in need or danger, those scissors and those thread and that needle are magic. They may be able to help you." Morag went, "Oh, thank you very much. I'll just go and get changed." "No! Go now." "Okay, I'll go now. I'm not wet. I haven't eaten and my hair's really bad. I'll go now." So she left. She left, the crazy old lady. She left, she went out, and she began looking now. She began looking for the place where the Sky Princess lived. She wanted to go and try and find her husband. And she was looking about and looking about, and she got very thirsty, and she paused for a minute. She said, and she was looking about, and she was wandering, and the sun was coming up now, and it was getting hot. She was still wet, and there was still the wind, and there was still blasts of rain, but she kept walking and walking. Then she was walking through a hill, up a hill, and as she was walking up the hill, a mist came down, a thick mist. And she was trying to make her way through this mist, and it was damp, and it was sticking to her. She was breathing the mist in, it was horrible. But she kept going, and she kept going. And then finally she came through the mist. And when she came through the mist, she found herself at the top of this great hill. And she looked around and she marvelled because she could see a city, a beautiful golden city stretching for miles and miles, a city balanced on the clouds. And she thought, oh my goodness, this is the land of the Sky Princess. And she looked around, and there was the most magnificent building of all, a huge palace. Oh, she said, a huge palace. She's very clever, this girl. It's a huge palace. Sky Princess must live in there. I'll tap the door and demand my husband. So she went over, we'll do special effects again. And the big door, it was a big door. The door opened. Wee Morag standing there, and there before her stood a tall, powerful being. A woman with dark eyes and hair, broad and beautiful, and staring down at her. And Morag's going, hello. And the woman said, hello. Are you the seamstress? And Morag went, what? Are you the seamstress? Have you come to make my wedding gown? For tomorrow I am to wed the most handsome man in Scotland. And Morag went, yeah, sure, seamstress, do it all the time, yeah, absolutely. I've got Instagram account, everything, yes. And so it was the Sky Princess, and the Sky Princess said, follow me. And the Sky Princess walked into the palace. The wee Morag walked in as well. And she followed the Sky Princess, and the Sky Princess took her through corridors and downstairs and further down, and even past the dungeons where a few folk were screaming. And took her on and eventually came to a room. She opened the door of the room, and inside the room there was all manners of cloths. There was silks, there was cottons, there was ribbons, there was buttons, there was lace, and all beautiful cloth. And the Sky Princess said, now, seamstress, make me the most beautiful wedding gown ever, and I shall return this evening to collect it. But if there's as much as one flaw, then I will slit your throat. And I went, okay, no worries, I'll get it sorted. So the Sky Princess left, and when she left, she shut the door and she locked it. So now poor wee Morag is locked in this room near to the dungeons where folk are going, she's thinking, this is not good, problematic. And she sees all the cloth, and she's thinking, what am I going to do? And she's looking at it, she's cold, and she's wet, and she's hungry. And then her pocket began shaking, and she looked, out jumped the scissors! Yes, and out jumped, I'm surprised, out jumped the needle! And out jumped the thread! Okay, and they began snipping, and threading, and doing all that kind of stuff. And she was looking at it, and she watched slowly but surely all the cloths and all the laces and all the buttons were slowly put together, and she could see a gown began to take shape. And it was so beautiful, and finally, she rested, and the poor wee soul, she fell asleep. She's wee, but she's got a big snore. And she falls asleep, and later on it's evening time, and she kind of wakes up, and she looks, and the dressing gown is beautiful. It is almost complete, and the last wee bits are getting sewed on. And she looks at it and she goes, oh, wow, that is so beautiful. And she no sooner spoke than a voice behind her went, yes, it is. And she turned around and she saw the door was open, and there standing in the door was the Sky Princess. And the Sky Princess said, I brought you some food and water, but I see the dress is almost made. And Morag went, yes. And the Sky Princess said, well, fine, it looks very good. I will wear that tomorrow gladly for my wedding. And I tell you what, seamstress, you must come to my wedding. Okay. And you must give me a gift as well. I don't have a gift. Give me those scissors. give me those thread and give me that needle as my gift. And wee Morag looked at him and went, okay, I'll give you the needle and the thread and the scissors on one condition. And the Sky Princess looked at him and went, you want a condition? Yes, I'll give them to you, gladly I'll give them to you. But the condition is this, that I lay tonight where you lay last night. The Sky Princess looked at him and went, ha 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 ha! You want to lay where I lay last night? So be it! Guards! Guards! Take this girl! And the guards came and they grabbed her and they took her away. And they took her all the way through the palace. They took her up to a tower. And at the very top of the tower was a bedroom, a big bed chamber. And of course, this is where the Sky Princess had laid the night before. And who was on the big bed in the chamber? Who was on the bed? Mr. Dog. He was lying there, beautiful and gorgeous and disrobed. Kind of like this. Oh. And Morag kind of looked at him and she went, oh, wonderful, wonderful. And she went over and she kind of shook Mr. Dog. Mr. Dog, Mr. Dog, I'm here to rescue you from the Sky Princess. Mr. Dog went, Sky Princess, oh, no, let me rest, let me rest. Wake up, Mr. Dog! Ha, ha, ha. And she kind of slapped his ass. Wake up! Oh. Sky Princess. Chill. And she tried him, she wept on him, tears she wept on him. She held him, she cried to him, she sang to him, she slapped him a few more times, but she could not rouse poor Mr. Dog. He kind of lay there on a dwam, kind of, and she shook him and shook him and shook him. And eventually the dawn came up, and the guards came back, and the guards dragged her away, and they took her down to the church. The church where the wedding was going to happen. How we do? There's a lot going on here. So she says, I have to have a drink of water. So now she's in the church. She's dragged down there and she's sitting in the back. All the lords and ladies, and all the magical creatures and the ancient warriors and magical beasts and all sorts, all these magical creatures and beings all begin to fill into the church. And they're sitting in the pews there. And she's sat there, poor wee Morag. And she's looking down the bottom, and then Mr. Dog appears. And Mr. Dog's looking very fine, he's got a fine kilt on him, he's very handsome, but he's still kind of got that kind of glacial look on him. And he's standing there. And then there's a skirtle of pipes, some bagpipers walk in, and everybody's kind of tapping their feet, and then they go down the front and they part away, and now it's just Mr. Dog standing there. And then the doors open again, the church, the big doors open, we'll do special effects, big doors. And in steps the Sky Princess. And she steps in by herself, nobody's escorting her, for she is the most powerful being. She walks in by herself, and she's wearing the fine wedding gown, the most beautiful wedding gown ever. And she begins to walk down there, walk down the aisle, and she's walking towards Mr. Dog, who's standing there with the kilt with the face on him. And she's walking, and poor wee Morag saying, oh, how will I rescue Mr. Dog? What can I do? Some of you might have guessed this already. What can I do? And she went, oh, Needle, Needle, if you can hear me now, please come and help me. And sure enough, there was a wee bing, and the needle appeared in the doorway. And the needle zipped down, and it kind of pinned the Sky Princess's shoes together, and she fell over and tripped, and everybody gasped. Oh! But the Sky Princess just laughed. Ha ha, she said, and she ripped the shoes off and ripped them into bits. And she carried on walking. She carried on walking barefoot now. And somehow being barefoot made her even more majestic and more powerful. So she walked further and further down, and poor Mr. Dog is still standing there. She's getting closer and closer, and poor Morag's going, oh, what am I going to do? Thread, thread, help me now. And the thread appeared in the doorway, and the thread came down, and it wrapped itself tight round the Sky Princess. But the Sky Princess just laughed. Ha, she said, and she flexed her thigh, and she flexed her breast, and she snapped the thread. She carried on walking. even more majestic and powerful. So now she's only a few feet from Mr. Dog, a few feet and a few moments from marrying him. The poor wee Morag, she goes, "Scissors, scissors, please help me now." And of course, a flash of light, and in the doorway appears the scissors. And the scissors are opening and closing, the great blades on them. And the sunlight, the morning sunlight is glinting off the blades. There's sparks of silver going round the church, and there's buildings slowly round, and then they go whoop, and they make their way down the church, really, really fast. So fast that I was whistling, but I can't whistle to make you stop. And they go heading towards the Sky Princess's back, and just as about to embed herself between her shoulder blades, the Sky Princess turns around, "Ah!" she says, and she smacks the scissors out to the air, and the scissors tussle away, but the scissors come back at her, and they're slipping away, and they're jabbing at her, and she's pushing them away, fighting them and kicking them, and all sorts, and they're sniffing at her, they cut her hair, her beautiful hair, it gets cut, they cut the beautiful gown, and they're stabbing at her, and she's blood on her, and there's cuts on her, and she's fighting for her life, and everybody else is going, "Oh!" and she's rolling and fighting, "Ah!" she's trying to come back out, there's slipping, and finally there's blood on the ground, and she slips in her own blood, and she falls on the ground, she's lying there, and the scissors look at her, and the scissors stop. And they rise up in the air 10 feet, 20 feet, and the scissors close, and they bend round like a dagger pointing at the Sky Princess's heart. And at that moment, Morag jumps out and goes, "Stop! Stop, scissors! Don't kill the Sky Princess!" And the scissors kind of float there for a moment, then they float away, and they fall to the ground. And Morag, she runs over, and she helps the Sky Princess stand up. And the Sky Princess stands up. And now her clothes are all torn, her hair is all torn, she's cut and bloody, and somehow she looks even more magnificent and more elemental and more majestic. And she's standing there and she says, "Thank you." "No problem." And the Sky Princess says, "I'll give you one thing. Ask one thing of me and I will give it to you." Three more looks at the Sky Princess. Then she looks at Mr. Dog. Mr. Dog's still standing there with the kilt on and the glaky face. She goes, "Sky Princess." And she's looking up at her and she's looking at Mr. Dog. She goes, "Sky Princess, I do have something to ask you." "Sky Princess, please, 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 Sky Princess, please. Don't marry Mr. Dog. Marry me." The Sky Princess looked at her. She said, "Okay. I would rather marry the most brave woman in Scotland than the most handsome man." And with that, she took the spell off Mr. Dog and sent him back to live with his mammy. He was very happy. And the Sky Princess and Morag married, and they lived happily and porridge-making way ever after.